I say good friend is because I've pestered her a lot over the last several weeks or months to get info. She's really great at being connected in the role that is early learning and how it impacts all of our lives, particularly the workforce, which she's going into quite a bit lately, right? So we're going to do a brief overview of what Tracy has found and just compiling information on the history of childcare and how we got to this point, and then we're going to open up for questions and then discussion as always. So.
And don't forget that Logan's going to talk after me, so I have a whole intro for you.
Oh, good.
Yes.
I apologize, I didn't make confusion.
Which most of you already know, we will dive into the adventure that has been the expansion project in Childcare County and all the hoops that have to go through and the resiliency that it's taken to get to where we are so far, where we continue to go. But sadly, Timothy can't be here, but we welcome Logan. Unconditional love.
Cool. So I will have notes because I don't want to forget anything that I want to say. So I don't need to read them all, but some of them I will. I'll say that this is an interdivisional sort of work. So I work in the licensing department and community outreach, and then also collaborate with our learning department. So Nicole and I have known each other for the last several months, and we've been talking for a while now. And I know that y'all, or some of you at least, have been to several of these, and so this is the culminating event. So I know that you talked about Childcare Center in Kittitas, and of course, Childcare and Commerce's program. And I know that Claudette here talked to y'all last week, so hopefully the information I have for you is new. But I was trying to fill in some polls and get the conversation going about things you might not have thought about. And so with that, I was going to start us off with a brief history of childcare in this country to understand how we got today on how cost points and sort of like the universal care. So childcare in the United States really got going at the heels of the Industrial Revolution in the 1850s. And that was so white women specifically who didn't have husbands in the picture could receive custodial care for their children so that they could go to work and support their family. Childcare profession, or how we think about it, really started in the 1900s, and that's when the brain science really started to come on board, and early learning that we know today came about with an academic and scientific focus. And to note here that there was an experience difference for children who had higher socioeconomic status and race privilege than for children who were receiving custodial care. And this proportionality is important to note because we still see it today. We see a disproportionality for kiddos who are ready for kindergarten readiness, who come from less privileged socioeconomic backgrounds, different race backgrounds. At this point in time, we have slavery in the 1900s still quite active, where Black women were regularly caring for white families, and simultaneously to that, we have the 1800s and the 1900s, where Native Americans were being forced off of land and put into reservations, and also being taken to Indian boarding schools. So all of that's happening simultaneously to sort of this differential that we see between custodial care.
Sorry to have our school version.
Well,
Will they bring up the impact on tribal nations? Is there enough data or information to show the impact that childcare has had on those populations, or?
that's a great question, and I believe we do have data. I don't have the data.
We're not present right now. I was just wondering if there was enough or if it was.
I think we do have enough, and we see that our Native populations continue to have disproportionality. But I also am super interested in getting that data stuff because I have. If we fast forward to World War II during the Lanham Act in 1945, that was the first time we've ever had a universal childcare system in the United States. And this was because the men went off to war and the women needed to support the troops. And so they opened up this childcare, and it was open to all races. And then they shut it down when the men came back. We also see differentiation of race and income come up during the civil rights movement, when in 1965, the federal Head Start program was created. And this was really a focus on supporting childcare for children whose families had low income, Black children in the country. And then to note, it's up there on the chart, but 1985, that's when Washington State started its free preschool program, the ECAP program. In the 1970s, we know that wages are stagnating across the country. And so that means that more women are entering into the labor force, and that more kiddos are in need of care, as we see more dual income houses that need to work together to make basic needs. Fast forwarding a bit all the way to welfare reform, which had a significant impact on childcare in the 1990s. So at that point, the temporary assistance for needy families, or TANF, replaced the Aid to Families with Dependent Children program. And this one's a mouthful. It was with the passage of the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act in 1996. And so this moved to TANF, also limited the receipt of benefits to 5 years. And when that big act name, which I have to read, Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act, it also consolidated previously three federal child care programs that served low-income families. And I put those programs under TANF, and those combined funds became our Child Care and Development Fund, or CCDF. The focus again was here for TANF families or those at risk of needing TANF assistance, and was tied specifically to support work. These benefits since the 1990s have not tracked with inflation, and so our value of this assistance is diminishing, with wages stagnating since the 1970s and the benefits being time limited and the decreasing value. Families are continually seeing an increasing lack of funds to pay what it costs to access care, either through subsidy or private pay. And because of that, providers who are disproportionately still women of color aren't earning a living wage, and they're not that it's enjoyed by other professions. Another thing to note here is that provider rates under CCDF were based on the rates that providers can charge in the private market rather than what it costs to provide childcare. And so since the private market can't bear the costs of childcare, subsidy also can't support the costs of childcare either. And then you throw in the pandemic, which we know was quite impactful to the industry. And we get up to present day that has led to the broken market of childcare, even as research indicates that early childcare and education programs are tied to school readiness and academic success.
Could you share why, although the subsidy has risen recently, it can only go to 85%?
Yes, the federal government, in order to utilize the CCDF funds, the federal government caps that at 85%. Area median income. So that's a federal requirement.
So it's not just state, which that's where I thought it was really just our state. So
Does the state of Washington have higher subsidy rates than other states, or is it fully across the board? Regulated, right?
I can't answer that exactly. I can kind of answer. A lot of these are across the signal, but now that we're moving to 85%, that will be our cap. And I'll talk about the rate model that we're going into here in a bit.
well, looking at your timeline, so in the 90s, when I was running a center in California, California's subsidy paid whatever we were charging. So when I came up here, I was a little shocked to find out what was happening. But then it could be because of what happened in 96, and then I was out of it and then back in. Interesting.
Yes, how we pay for it is certainly interesting. So I want to pivot and talk generally about the landscape of early learning and Washington State. So this might be a review for some of you, but walk through a high level about the importance of high quality childcare and why we see some of these challenging cost realities as we look across the sector. So this one here is our universe of childcare in Washington statewide, and it has descriptive data points. So the largest circle, that one there, like I don't know what color it's showing up for you. That yellow color, it represents all the children in the state of Washington, or an approximation about 1.2 million of children from birth to age 12. We estimate that about 64% of children ages 12 and under have caregivers that work outside the home. And so that number of kids that we can estimate that could need care during working hours is about 759,000. Licensed childcare specifically is covered in those blue circles. The capacity statewide is slightly larger than it was during COVID. And we have a capacity right now to serve about 41% of kids in the state under 5. And the capacity to serve about 5% of kids in the state ages 5 through 12. But again, those after school programs aren't always licensed care. The caseload for subsidy programs is still below COVID levels, with about 23,600 households, with about 40,000 children taking part in licensed subsidized childcare. This slide right here is a little bit old, but it's from a point in time count in April 2022, and that shows us the number of the early learning workforce working in licensed and family-friendly nature childcare, and showing that we have about 60,000 workers that are providing direct care services. So, why do we care about quality? We do receive funds from the Federal Child Care Development Block Grant, about $572 million each biennium, and we're required by the federal government to spend some of these funds on quality for both preschool and for infants and toddlers. We also our legislature passed the Early Start Act in 2015, and that act was really showing the state's commitment to embed quality in the early learning system. And it also required participation from early learning programs that received Working Connections, childcare, and ECAP funding to participate in quality. All states have a quality rating system. Ours is called Early Achievers. You might know that. Our Early Achievers program includes professional development, coaching, quality rating and improvement systems, evaluation and assessment effectiveness of childcare programs and high quality standards. We do make sure that we can see observable increases in childcare quality, and early learning providers are prepared to help children be successful in school. And over 3/4 of our childcare providers have rated in quality currently. Again, Early Achievers is part of that continuum. So working from licensing through ECAP requirements, and it's built on that foundation, the decision green at the bottom, between children, their caregiver, and their environment. And then alongside of the house in the specific diagram, we dig into provider support, and then inside the house we have families and child support and curriculum development. And all of these are what make Washington quality early achiever system.
So not everyone has to, maybe this is a question for client, not every provider has to participate in early achievers, but those who are studies that we do.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And is this important information to share with parents to understand the importance of this quality rating system, or is there other ways to show a quality rating system to those who don't participate in early achievers?
There's other ways to measure quality. My own opinion, when they tied it to the subsidy, as much as I feel the wisdom in that, it also, especially between the west side and central and eastern Washington, you can see that the west side can just opt out of it. Mm-hmm. And say that they have quality, but I don't know that parents actually know how to know that difference.
I would say that too, and parents can look it up on Childcare Check. I believe they have
Right.
a quality rating
There's more
system.
information.
Yeah, there's more information, and I can also share that I think that it tends to be more absorbed in the center base, the quality rating. I don't have the slide anymore on this, but I do have a slide that shows the participation rate.
Between private
And family, between centers and family homes.
So from the study that we did, most of the providers on this side didn't want to have anything to do with early achievers because of the perceived extra work, which, excuse me, in a way there is that, but it really was a communication thing as to why it was so successful.
And I think we have some folks who are working on that communication gap.
Yeah, they've redone their whole rating also, which is going to make a big difference for those who've been through it before.
This one here is another look at the childcare and early learning landscape. So again, I think it answers your question that all of these providers can participate in early achievers, and this outlines where licensed childcare or state-funded preschool can happen, and that includes family home centers, outdoor nature base, and in schools. The slide has more details. Our state's early achiever ratings work across the system. The coaches work throughout the state, and they're a very diverse group representing our diverse Washington communities. About 35% of early achievers coaches speak another language, with Somali and Spanish being our top spoken languages. And so we work to have the coaches be reflective of the communities that they serve. And to note that this chart here does not, as the other chart did, this chart does not specifically address all of Washington's diverse mixed delivery systems. And so we know that early learning can take place in a variety of settings. And so that includes both formal and informal, school-based, and that in a network of community locations early learning happens. And that includes things like community centers, faith-based organizations, museums, libraries. And so we specifically also wanted to mention that Washington's Family, Friend, and Neighbor, or FFN, providers are not included in this chart, and we do know that they're the most common type of child care and also instrumental in providing healthy development for children and preschool readiness, or kindergarten readiness, sorry. And again, the goal of the state has set a goal that 90% of early achiever sites be kindergarten ready when they enter kindergarten. And again, reiterating that families have the choice to choose providers that meet their family specific needs. So then we get into what does it cost to deliver high quality care. So we know that childcare isn't financed like a public good, like elementary education or secondary education, and that families, both families and care providers are responsible for carrying that cost of care. Our subsidy program supports qualifying families with specific incomes, and we're moving towards an 85% of the state's median income. I did the math yesterday, and I believe that equates to about $8,035 for a family of 4. And I have a note here, but to reiterate that this is the maximum amount the state can support based on federal requirements for those CDF dollars. A little bit about childcare businesses is that on average, childcare businesses spend at least around 85% of their wages. And this is really different, other revenue on wages. And this is different than our other low wage industries. There are state and federal requirements that support health and safety and quality of care for young children, and leading to sort of that staffing heaviness. For example, when caring, you all probably know this, but when caring for infants, it's one person for every 4 infants, for example. The task force report that was finished in 2022 from the Child Care Collaborative Task Force had some figures that you might have heard, but the poverty rate for child care providers in Washington is 17.7%, which is much higher than workers in other, which is much higher than for the Washington state average overall, which is 8.2%. And then comparing that to K through 8 teachers, early child care providers, the poverty rate is 7.9% higher than it is for K through 8 teachers. And the report indicated that 39% of Washington child care providers may rely on one or more sources of public assistance. So then we get into what's going on now. So we know that child care subsidy rates don't cover the provider's full cost to provide high quality care. And the work that the task force did, and I'll get into it here in a second, but they developed a cost of care model. And then what's happening now is that we're going to set those rate settings. So that gets to, I think, Nicole, your question about like how they know how much they're going to pay. Well, that's happening now, and that's being run through Child Care Aware as per the Fair Start for Kids Act, and they will talk about this later. They'll be updating the models because we need to update our data from 2022 for the CDF funds, and then from there they'll be developing rates. This is the timeline. Oh no, that's a lie. Did I leave the slide? Well, I lost the slide, but I'll tell you all about it. The definitions for childcare, I had it up on the slide, but the report did define cost of quality, and I will read you the definition. Cost of quality care means the true cost of childcare to operate a high quality early learning program with staff and materials needed to meet quality standards and provide developmentally appropriate learning environment for all children. It includes adequate compensation, wages, and benefits to recruit and retain a professional and stable workforce. The other definitions that were included in the report included price of care and cost of care. And currently, again, most child care providers set their tuition based on what the local market conditions are and what their families can pay. and what they can do so that they can operate it as close to full enrollment as possible. And this market rate methodology can negatively impact communities, rural communities or areas with high concentrations of families with low incomes, because again, those rates are based on what the families can afford rather than what it costs to actually provide the care, and that can disincentivize providers from serving children with special needs. My slides are all fun, but I can tell you what I got out of order in my own sheet. But moving from the task force report, DCYF is responsible for submitting the rate model, and that's what you're seeing up here on the slide. And so a little bit of the way that works is that to get our funding, we submit a cost of care quality to U.S. Treasury's office, the comptroller of the currency, and that's part of the requirement for the CCDF funding. So the 2022 cost model will be updated because it is required to be, because it doesn't currently meet the timeline for the CCDF update. And then once that's approved by the OCC at the federal level, DCYF will then, and the rates are decided, DCYF will submit a package to a decision package to the governor's office for the 2025-27 biennium.
Such a long timeline.
It's a long timeline and there's a lot of steps and but I do have slides up that show sort of what the cost of quality report showed, and I have them up for more illustrative examples for the difference between cost differential. I have slides that show the cost of providing early quality childcare at early achievers ratings 3, 4, and 5. If I can actually read my slides, it would have been an average. Let's see. I have to read it, y'all. I wasn't prepared to do this. It does small. For example, centered toddlers to meet licensing standards and a cost of quality report that was comprehensive. There's an estimate that it would cost $24,851 at a licensing standard per child. At an early achievers level 3, $26,349 per child, and at an early achievers level 5, $29,601. And so that's per child. So that's the cost of providing that, and then also as an example to show the discrepancy between our reality now and a living wage model, I had and I'll make sure I included a living wage model by role and region. And so how this was created in the Childcare Task Force report was that they surveyed was via a survey, and then they estimated the role and the region scale up. And so again, sorry that you can't see it, but in Central Washington here, a program director currently to make about 35,000. Can't really read that too. Getting old is hard. $35,255, and with if we were to scale that up based on that report, that same center director, if they were making a cost of living, would be making $85,245. And so we see these.
But the average is making what?
The average is making 35.
And that is across the board in the state.
Yeah, based on survey data. So I had those up primarily as examples to showcase that huge discrepancy that we're seeing, and that we know, even going back to those like poverty level wages, about to give that picture of the industry and where we're at between what we're currently paying for quality and what it costs. And I know that y'all have already talked about that, and I know that Logan's going to talk about that too. About his. Perfect. So while we have what we consider to be strong foundation for our state mixed delivery system, there's a lot of work that we still need to do so that we're responsive to all families' strengths, needs, and hopes. This requires addressing several central challenges, which include the affordability of care, access to the type and the amount of the care needed, supporting the providers who provide the care, and building a generally more equitable system. So my role, I've been talking to states across the country because with the COVID pandemic and ARPA funding, many states have embarked on employer-supported care programs. And they've either just used ARPA funding, but in some cases they're using committed state funding to see these through. And I just want to provide these as sort of examples. In Michigan and a few other states are doing this model as well. They're trying out a cost sharing model. And so that's where the employer contributes, the employee contributes, and the state contributes to childcare. And usually that's done in equal, like thirds. It definitely can impact cost and quality is what they're reporting. The conundrum of cost and quality and the financial challenges are real. But what this does not do, at least directly, is it doesn't impact the childcare supply, but it does support affordability. So in Colorado, they're taking a different approach. They're utilizing state funding, and they are working with childcare who are committed to already, or with employers who are already in the state where they're committed to build and who have the resources to do it. And so they're supporting with some pre-design funding, but basically what that program is doing is bringing employers through a cohort training to understand the business of childcare, the economics of childcare, foundational health and safety requirements, the emphasis on staffing. And they are finding that it's really important for businesses here to understand when they're embarking in partnerships what the reality of the childcare sector is. And the last model that I'll bring up is in Texas. And Texas is working on an incentive program to expand so that providers can expand services in partnership with childcare, or with employers and childcare providers. And what they've come to understand is that developing a memorandum of understanding and the formalization of this process has been really helpful in their childcare providers getting additional support and being able to articulate that. And it's our, from this model, we were pretty inspired because from like a grassroots level, they're telling us that this collaboration can look like anything. And I think that that's what we're excited about, is that it doesn't have to be something that's super formal and that it can build. We've been doing some research at DCYF over what our current connection between providers and businesses are. And so we see those Bright Horizons and Childcare that are primarily on the west side of the state. And they're able to really support employers who are able to finance some things. And they can really do their a la carte shop. They can do it all. They can do a feasibility study. They can make a building. They have differing agreements that, for rent or no charge facilities, which is essential to them being able to operate, and a variation of services that includes things like management fees or maintenance and janitorial services, different ways that the employers can directly support childcare costs. You may know about this, but we have a company here in Eastern Washington connected to a manufacturer who is operating a childcare center directly. And these folks who work are childcare providers. They are employed by the company. The company assumes the profit and loss of the childcare business. And they're also able to provide their staff with living wage jobs and benefits. And similarly to the big corporations model, they're also able to centralize some things like payroll and HR. So that takes some of the load off of the childcare providers.
The company we all know.
I'm pretty sure it's Schweitzer.
Oh, okay.
And then here in Central Washington, y'all have First Fruits, who also operates their own childcare. But those examples are actually very few, far between. And what we found through talking to a lot of folks is that, and this probably won't come as a surprise, but what we found through talking to a lot of the folks is that it really depends on who is assuming the profit and the loss and who's willing to accept the risk, because at the heart of this, childcare is a low margin, high risk business, and employers are a profit driven, cost saving entity. And so that connection between the two is going to be a tricky one because we're working on two different spaces. And so we are still in considering how we best go about that. And so that's sort of where our work has been and where our conversations could be, because we know that there are creative ways that folks can partner. We know that there are willing employers out there, and also hearing that what's important to talk about is, again, the reality of the childcare business, why it costs so much and how we got here. So that's why it was going to be a perfect segue into Logan, sort of talking about their journey with Happy Feet. With community support and telling everybody how that all works.
I'm looking at.
Poor Logan, this is why I'm gonna jump up there, there's ropes in it.
Sorry, Logan.
I'm sure we'll jump in at any point in time.
Yeah.
We'll specifically talk about the project with Happy Feet and how much work they've put into the expansion of, and I don't think anyone knew going into this project about how much work it was gonna be, how many hurdles we had to jump through. And by we, I'm like, I can't say we had, but me and Logan and Steve done most of the jumping, and I don't think show pointing, but you are the display. Hi, welcome. Sorry, I'm Nicole. I'm the community projects director with the Childcare County Health Network. What is your name? I don't think we got an intro.
Oh.
Do you want to share why
I'm
you're
Virginia,
the Virginia? Okay.
just a parent trying to see what I can do to.
We have a huge need. So I'll just jump into when we're going to the health network and talking about the assessment. How I feel or what I perceive and everything we've discovered is that when we talk about childcare, it's not a problem until it's your problem. But COVID, during the whole world of COVID, we've been, highlighted it's all of our problems. It's a community problem, it's an economic problem, it's a problem with the workforce. There's issues that we have to address with uncertain where to start. We talk about the affordability and the quality of childcare, and me as a parent, I can only say this, my own chips cost me $2,000 a month to pay for childcare, which is really difficult, but I would pay millions of dollars for my children to be loved and cared for. So I know how much quality comes out of early learning and how much my children have developed. So we can make that more affordable, right? But we talk about how much the director's making for staff, and it's not enough. I mean, we should be paying childcare providers and teachers and staff a lot of money. They're caring for young children and families, so chicken or egg situation. So with childcare and trying to address where our biggest issue is in Contest County, most of it I can speak to, and it's probably reflective of most of our nation, is that the biggest issue is access to it and affordability. If you just don't have enough, and it's really expensive, and it's expensive for the provider, but it's a constant moving of pieces. And in Kittitas County, within the health network, on our childcare work group, we identified we need more. We need more childcare. Who's going to do it? And then as usual, people are like, yeah, we need that. And then we're all looking around like, who wants to do it? And of course, I look at Busy and Logan, and poor Logan's probably don't know what we're getting into. Busy's like, I'll do it. And he was like, oh, no, she likes to collect them all, if you will. But huge champions, and to move this project forward. And in expanding childcare particularly, it's taken a very diverse, supportive group to move it forward. Misty and Logan being experts in taking care of children and families, they can step up and we're going to do this. And they applied for the Early Learning Facilities Fund, which is $1 million was awarded thanks to the partnerships through KBH and the Health Network. We're like, hey, let's go do it. Let's go build a childcare center. And they were like, a lot more expensive than we thought. And then so in the process, this whole thing has been a giant process, and it's taken so many contributors to move this piece forward. I mean, we looked at the county and there was 4 correct locations that were possible to put in a childcare just based on zoning restrictions. And this was like we're gonna pick this one because it's out of the 4 that was the best spot and a matter of elimination. So we went to the county.
The best spot, it was within a mile of our current location. The seller was willing to work with us in terms of financing and things like that. The city was willing to work with us in terms of utilities and things like that. So yeah, but literally process of elimination, and 2 of them sold while we were deciding.
In the process.
Well,
So with that, we're like, yeah, why is that?
and even before that, we were looking at existing buildings.
Yeah. But the
To,
hospital-
Impossible.
to not have to build a building.
Right.
And then we found out really quick that wasn't gonna happen.
Right, and so some people don't know that those are problems until it's their problem. So we went to the county and said, hey, nobody can build a childcare if they wanted to because of zoning restrictions. So we went to the community development services under the county and said, hey, because of these zoning restrictions, we can't even build a brand new childcare if we wanted to. And so they said, oh yeah, no problem, I'll take care of that. And so they had put together the proposal and went to the annual docket to make that amendment to the zoning changes. Which is great, but that took a good process, so we couldn't hold up the process. So they went ahead and purchased the land, and you could jump in anytime. So that's what it's taking. So they're continuing their process. Like, okay, we'll go to the county, and the county will contribute, and they'll help us out. Well, it's great that people do want to help. You just need to ask. You just need to build relationships and say, hey, just so you know, like this is an issue. Maybe can you come help us? And they fully sponsored the whole amendment. It passed at 11 o'clock at night on the annual docket. But moving forward, it's been a hurdle after hurdle after hurdle. I mean, Logan could attest to this, I'm sure he's had a lot of tears and late nights trying to work through contracts and construction, but we shouldn't be asking childcare providers to not only take care of children, quality care, and to mold these beautiful brains into their development. And we're asking, if you want to go into childcare, you have to be an expert in contract and construction and how to work with the county and the city and jumping through all these hoops. And I know the day-to-day operations is not like, oh yeah, I've got plenty of time.
Yeah.
I mean, I poor Logan Missy and their team have lost plenty of sleep trying to figure it all out.
We lost members of our team because we've been trying to figure it all out. I went through 3 site directors in the last
Yeah.
3 years because of burnout. We just
Can-
literally, I had the site director call me at midnight one night crying, and she said, "I cannot take this anymore
Just
And I
looks
said-
too much.
because it's too much." And I said, "Then it's time for you to find your next adventure. Let's find you your next adventure." And she did. Within a couple weeks, she was on. She's actually teaching now.
Oh,
And she is doing amazing, and that's better for her, but it just supports the kind of what you're saying with, we can't do it all, we're already, the median wages for directors, I can attest for that.
okay, ask her, I don't think so.
No, it's fine, Missy has $36,000 a year, that's her salary. And she works 80 hours plus a week. We figured out a while back, actually, that, she spends 40 hours a week just on staffing. Whether that be moving staff in the middle of the day,
Coverage.
call-offs, coverages. Childcare is like a giant petri dish, so people get sick.
Oh, yeah.
And we can't hire enough help to have enough backup, so you're constantly, we're right on the precipice of being understaffed severely to the point where we're gonna have to shut a classroom because we don't have enough staff that day. So both of my site directors work in classrooms at least once a week. Right.
The director steps in.
Yeah, director steps in. I even went and did all of the training so that I can be an assistant teacher, so that I can step into the classroom, which.
Because we go to there anyway.
If anybody knows, me being in a classroom is an emergency. While I love taking care of my own kids, I love taking care of my own kids and spoiling other people's kids. In a licensed care facility, standard wise, my play is a little different. But I think it's really important to note that childcare providers, and I'm not shooting my own horn, even though it's gonna sound like it, they're heroes.
Oh, absolutely.
And then
One
to
that-
ask them to take on all of this when it comes to like the health funds and things like that, it's, sorry for the French, it's damn near impossible.
It is,
People,
I cannot believe how far this thing will get pushed through, they probably will hate me.
That's still the.
I told Missy never again.
But truly, had you not had the support of KVH, of additional community help, it's just not doable. And from my experience with Heritage, same thing. If I didn't have the university to maneuver through that grant, I looked at that grant years before and said no, because the college was not on board. But then this time it was a large enough fund and somebody else has put in money, so they were okay with it, but your regular standalone centers are just never even gonna dip their toe in here, They would have, the first time we couldn't even find a building that we could convert, thinking that was the answer, would just say, never mind then. Most people are not saying, yeah, let's build one.
But you do, that's just the thing, we should be uplifting, we should be advocating, we should be sharing the story, is that you have people that truly care about children and their own children and the community that they live in, making sure children are ready for kindergarten, make sure they're ready to socialize, they're safe, they're happy, they're healthy. There's more eyes on the children that need those extra eyes, those extra supports, but we shouldn't make it more difficult for providers, or should we be wrapping around them and uplifting them and supporting them and sharing the story. And that's why we reach out to people across the state, that they should be like, this is actually what's happening. So people are just throwing up their hands like, I wanted to build a childcare, and it turns out that's really hard, so never mind. We should be like, this person wants to do it, like, what do we need to do, what is the barrier? We have somebody who's walked the walk in all the levels of childcare and understanding like what are the challenges on opening a new one, on operating a larger one, a small one. They like talk to somebody, and then they can also know how to advocate for you because they have that experience under their belt. But yeah, it's been a very unique road. And it takes an absolute wraparound diverse team to move it forward. And I don't think it would be possible. And I don't know what they're doing in other parts of the state who got the funding to move this project forward.
Well, another point is, Nicole graciously got me connected to, Kim Schneider's office and, ditched the meeting on me.
So you're not the sweat showing up, you, free the free one. Free the nice one.
And we had a great conversation about everything, but then it to show the perspective from, elected officials' offices is, we provided all the, I even brought the 85-page assessment. I was like, you're welcome to have this if you want, or it's other. But some basic information and like the map that Nicole always shares that shows like the glaring red Kittitas County at Childcare Desert. And at the end of our conversation, she said, so once you build this facility, you have 120 spaces. It's somewhere in the right ballpark. And then, but her response was, so once you do that, then you'll get out of the Childcare Desert, right? But like, we're gonna take care of one center's wait list,
Yeah.
basically, and that's it. So even people at that level, even though they understand that there's a need and they're hearing it from a lot of perspectives, they don't understand the vastness of this issue.
And how important it is to start to move more upstream and figuring it out.
And you're right with, well, it's not a problem till it's your problem. So I've been doing advocacy day for 7 or 8 years now, I think. And finally, we are talking to legislators who, they didn't have the issue, but suddenly their kids and their grandkids are having like, this is a problem.
They can't get into medical appointments to their doctor.
Because they're also looking at the grandparents like, hey, can you chip some money in to pay for this childcare? And they're like, God, what?
Yeah.
So.
And I'll share from the state perspective, like the infant and toddlers, if you change that map, I don't know what map you showed the first week, but if you change that
It was
map to
what
just
numbers?
infant and toddler, the whole state is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just isolated to Kittitas County, it is definitely.
So, do you know if there have been any, and I know it's kind of not in your department, but is there any whispering or talking about like, hey, one solution would maybe be a better family leave situation for the infant care?
That's a great question. I think that gets all sort of jumbled together. I mean, I can't speak for that definitively.
Right.
But I do think that that's getting into the conversations about, quality workplaces and what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Washington State, you may know, we have instant at work programs. And so there's a little bit of that from 0 to 6 months where you can, and I think that it's a universal that they can tell you how to do it, the infinite work program where you can keep your baby with you for 6 months or until they integrate.
Okay.
And so there's processes to go through, I think, that like the state has, for instance, at work. So that's one thing that exists currently.
And yet for everybody who was home during COVID with an infant trying to do their work can also attest to that. Not always productive, but.
Yeah, and I know, and again, unofficially, and I know I'm being recorded with this hard part, but I know that there's, I think the program, so personally, share my babies are 4 and 7, and I don't think the program existed, or maybe it just existed. But I was your employer, I believe, like there's an opt-in section, like the employer has to, like the state does it, like if I work for the state of Washington, we have that HR policy, but it's an open policy for instance at work, but I think the employer, don't quote me on this, I think there's work the employer has to do to allow that as a benefit.
Right, and I bet the employer has to be a certain size before they have to.
I don't know if anybody has to.
Okay.
I think it's a benefit, I think it's a
Opt
opt-in.
in, opt out.
I don't think there's any requirement to do it.
Not yet.
So it's been a process, well, we're partially the way through. We've spent our laughter on Logan here to attest the details of the project in itself, but we'd also noticed that it's gonna cost way more than $1 million for this project. Where are we at? 3.2, 3.3, 3.8, 9, 10? 3.6. It just keeps on growing.
So our current program, we have a license capacity of 62.
And then what is the project size for the?
112 will be a new facility. And then we have been operating, we've been renting church space. So do a before and after school program as well as a half day preschool program to try to meet the needs. The school district was able to bring in right at school, and that pretty much wiped out the demand for it. So we have since closed that location. But yeah, so we're hoping to expand by 112, and we're always looking for more opportunities to continue to meet the family needs. That's truly what it is. For happy feet, I can't speak for all childcare providers, but for us, it's truly about meeting our community. My wife and I both grew up here. We're both super familiar with the area, you know, a lot of people, but none of that really got us anywhere until KBHN and the hospital set up. And then get the traction going.
And I'll also say, I think there might, that the Kittitas County, and I don't have the numbers on me, but Families from the Neighbor Network, for kiddos who are eligible for, families who are eligible for subsidy, and with some other, whoever could be eligible for subsidy, our Families from the Neighbor Network is something that, can also, you do have to do certain things to be eligible, but for some families, that's super helpful, and you get paid to provide care, family members.
Now, I don't know if maybe I'm not wording this correctly, do you have to have an income requirement?
It is an income requirement. If you're eligible for subsidy, it's based on that.
Okay. Which is good, but also, I probably would not, like, with myself, need a family friend and neighbor, I don't think that I would qualify, which also sucks, because myself and the rest, like the entire workforce, is they're trying to get a childcare. And you're just kind of in that middle, like, you just make too much to get that.
Or you're doing it. You're making it work.
Yeah. That's the thing, making it work, but, some changing to come in.
Just to speak to the infant shortage a little bit, as of yesterday, our infant list has 66 babies on it. And we have planned 3 infant rooms in the new facility, and I won't even take half of that off of our list.
And I can share some research that we've done. We've talked to providers who have current connections with employers, and about 13 or 14, and nearly all of them boards of infants on the list. And I'll also say empty preschool spots, which again, I didn't speak about it here, but the dynamics of, and Logan can probably speak to it well more eloquently and like with real numbers than I can, but like the way that the child care works is provide with preschoolers being essential to help support the infants and toddlers. Hearing that just the number of folks, the couple handfuls of folks that we've talked to directly in the employer supported care, hearing that their wait list for infants and toddlers is 4 long years out, and empty preschool spots.
And when you were speaking earlier about the 1-to-4 ratio for infants, this state also caps the size of the group, which means 8. You can do 9, but that means 3 staff members, so you're not gonna do that because we can afford that.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're running into with the new facility, because 3 baby rooms sounds great. So with 64 on my wait list, just infants, I can't even take out half of the wait list. And I can't justify, I mean, staffing wise, in terms of paying staff to be in there, like you said, having a 3rd staff in there for 1 additional baby just doesn't pencil. And that sounds terrible to say that it doesn't pencil, but at the end of the day, we have to be able to manage the limited finances that we have as a child care provider to be able to survive for another day.
And then like an extreme opposite is California, that doesn't cap the size of the group. So if you have a huge room, and I've toured one with my daughter, that they have 16 babies in that room. So can you imagine? They have enough adults in there. There was also their assistant teachers were not really like trained assistant teachers. They were like great grandmas. I'm a grandma. They were great grandmas. But they were even knocking kids over, and I was. I was just having so many reactions to that tour, and my daughter was asking all these great questions. And in my head, I'm like, you are out of your mind. He's not coming here.
Before just
Like, for one time, kidnapping my grandchild and bringing him up to my center because in another state because he's not here. And then she obviously decided to stay home, not put him in care at all. But Yeah.
It was great information though, because that capacity limit has always, I've always questioned why, because you have the room, why not? But
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Just because you have enough bodies legally in that room doesn't necessarily mean the quality of care is up to par.
It was frightening, it was just the noise level actually, of 15 babies. Even though they weren't all burning, but there were a number. I was like, wow, okay, I understand the 8, because I too, when I worked in California, I refused to do info. And then when I came up here, everybody does info. So I'm okay, I'm gonna have to. And then I'm like, oh, really? Only 8? Why, the room is the same size as the preschool room, why? And then I saw that, I'm like, oh, yeah, I get it. Totally
I
understand.
think that's a really important point that dovetails into, you said everybody does infants, and most centers.
Yeah, not everybody.
But most centers do actually try
The
to,
west side.
yeah, but here, in Kittitas County, a lot of the centers are actually closing. their
They've stopped,
rooms,
yeah,
They stopped
exactly.
actually because they can't
It's not
handle
financially.
the
Heritage,
expense of it anymore.
Our brand new, we don't do this, we've not done infants for
And
probably
that's
15
a
years.
really good point. And so in this whole process, I understand we, but it's really both. Very well, that way. I think we as activists, it's like in this process of trying to meet the need and develop this 112, which has been a whole process. We still have home centers closing. I just got information last night. There's a center going to close just because it's not feasible. It's not financially an option, and they just have other stuff going on. We're going to continue to see centers close. People try and open centers, but we're just chasing our tail here and trying to clean it up as we go. But that's really unfortunate because we don't get enough of the heads up to know that there is support in the community. Like if you still want to keep this open, or if you want to open a new center, we have supports. We have champions in the community who will wrap around you and will, what do you need help with? What do you need? And just to wrap this up, because I know we're getting close. We're about 1 o'clock. You have a question?
No.
So with the Happy Feet expansion project, it's obviously our huge champion is Happy Feet, but it's taking the support with the health network partners, consulting. It takes, KBH has put forth quite a bit of time and money. We went to the county and asked for $500,000, and they awarded $500,000 to go towards the project because we needed money to spend the money to get the money back but they weren't really getting money back, are we? So it's just taken, it's like, okay, we have this issue. These people, these folks are ready to address it. They're ready to take on the challenge and find a solution. Like, what are you going to do to wrap around this, and how does it impact you? And so we have huge leaders and champions that do acknowledge that, like, yeah, this is an issue, especially when you come with a giant assessment saying, this is what it looks like, here's the numbers, and we're just going to continue to grow. So the county has gotten behind it. They're like, yep, absolutely. They've stamped it. Moving forward, I'm assuming you got some giant check that came in. So it's huge support. So then we went to the city recently to ask for the traffic impact fees exemption, which we had no idea was coming down, correct? You got to it, you're like, oh, turns out that's the one you need too.
$251,000.
Can you believe? Yeah.
You're asking someone who's ready and willing to take on childcare, infant care, supporting the community and putting everything at risk.
How could you come up with that? Yeah.
So I'll plug that there, I feel, granted, I don't live in Kittitas County or work with this, but I do feel like when we start to talk about where people can plug in, that like communities have expertise in them. And that like there are massive holes to fill, and that like what we can do to be supportive is to start to look at where those holes can be plugged in. And so this infant care, I mean, again, in a dreaming world, this is, I know we're out of time, one of the questions, so what could it look like? I mean, it could really, like, that's why I like some of these states, like, it can look like anything to help scale it up, and I think I find hope in that it doesn't need to be prescribed, we just need to do more support.
Well, I mean, an understanding of the city with that whole parking or whatever,
Traffic impact.
and traffic impact. When the comment was made, oh, you wouldn't qualify for the waiver because you're not an early learning facility, you're just a childcare center. Like, what? So, yeah. Pretty sure.
No, I need to figure
That's what the community education has to have.
Absolutely.
Because they don't know.
They don't know what to solve their problem.
Yeah, they
If you explain where it is an issue and really illustrating that and showing it to the audience that needs to hear everything, who needs to hear what. And in this, like a huge puzzle piece, obviously our childcare issue is we don't have enough, it's not affordable, it's not as accessible as we'd like to be. The childcare workforce is not getting enough support and love and technical assistance in developing that. There's so many pieces of like, well, it's a broken up here, we need to fix this, we're gonna fix this, but at the end of the day, like, we just need to start. Like, we just need to start, like, we have to be like, all right, we'll do it, like, hey, let's go. Or a champion behind happy feet and say like, what can we do to help you? And in our community, meaning Kittitas County, is that we're moving this forward. And we don't want this to fail, like, so what do we need to do to keep pushing it forward, and who do we need to get involved? It's just starting somewhere, it's talking to human beings. County commissioners, city council, mayors, they're all just human beings trying to do the best they can with what they got. They don't know what's happening in the community unless you go tell them. The state doesn't know unless you go tell them what's happening. It's so important that we document and share this story, because we got, we have the Tracy's, we have the Jody, we've got the Lori Menendez, people that are working within the system, that are working at all levels in between. So it's letting people know what we're doing here. Like, we're not waiting for someone else to fix the problem. We're gonna do what we can with what we have.